All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. By way of introduction, my name is Sarah Ahmed, and I am the Director of Career Communities Alumni Career Advancement here at Career Education. We are so thrilled to be able to offer this webinar to all of you through the gracious offer of Connie Baher, an alumna. And I just wanted to give a couple pieces of just sort of some thoughts about how we're going to start and how the conversation will go. We're estimating probably about 35-40 minutes of Connie's presentation. The inputs that we had asked for earlier will be incorporated into this presentation. As you may have noticed already, I am actually logged in under our colleague Kenny's name, so you'll see his picture there. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please chat that name directly, and your question will come directly to me. That said, we will be leaving time to answer some questions at the end. So please feel free to send those to me through the chat function, and certainly we can, we'll do our best to get to as many as possible. Also, this is being recorded, and it will be shared on the Wellesley Career Education website. So I just wanted to mention that, and we can share that link out when it's ready. But without too much further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Connie. Connie's an alumna class of 63, and she has graciously, who is that? Are you there? Oh, sorry. She's graciously offered her services and expertise in this arena. She's written a case on the case of the kickass retirement, and we're really excited and thrilled to have her with us here today. So on to you, Connie.
Thank you, Sarah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're perfect.
Wonderful. Well, okay, fine. All right, and it just said I was muted, but I'm not?
Nope, you're all good.
Perfect, okay. So thank you. We are stoked, guys, to have you all here. I mean, we're really amazed at the number of people who have shown up, and I'm really delighted to be with you. Another couple of words of housekeeping. We sent out the advanced worksheets, and this would be the time to make sure that you have them printed out. If you didn't get the worksheets, or if you hadn't had time to look at them, just grab a piece of paper so you can jot down your ideas as we go through the webinar. And as Sarah said, the webinar is being recorded, and also I'm going to give her the slide deck so that will be available for downloading if you want to after the webinar. And of course, we'll look forward, if we have time, for some questions as well. So let's get started here. The plan is, I would like to share with you what I've learned. You know how sometimes people invent products because they couldn't find one that would do the job? Well, this project came about because I was looking for some answers myself. If you're retired, and I know a lot of you are thinking about retirement, you know that there's no guidebook out there for how to actually do retirement, how to make the most of the rest of our lives. So partly to answer my own questions, and I hope some of yours as well, I've put together a pocket handbook for these later years, and that's what I'd like to share with you today. I want to show you some tools and approaches, but essentially today is about taking some time out for you to look at where you're at and what you really want from the years ahead. So quick word about what I'm all about. I'm actually an East Coast gal, although I'm out here in California right now. The sun is not out. It's early in the morning. It's a little bit foggy. But I was born in New York City. I grew up in Connecticut, and then we get to the Boston part. Went to Wellesley, class of 63. I got married, had 2 children, and I actually worked at Wellesley for a while in the development office, and then I pivoted to the private sector. I got an MBA at Harvard, where I fell in love with tech, and I became a VP of 2 Boston-based tech companies. And then the scene shifts to California, the San Diego part. We pulled up stakes, we moved out west, and I started my own company doing strategy consulting and executive education. Now, the third part, it was on a trip to Southeast Asia that I fell in love again, and this time with Cambodia. While I was still working at my day job, I began also to work pro bono in Cambodia, and for more than 10 years, conducted management workshops for museums and cultural organizations over there. The now part, I'm now on the faculty of a career transition program for ex-Navy SEALs. I'm also on the faculty and executive team for a mini MBA program run by the local Harvard Business School Club. And along the way, I have become fascinated with people's retirement lives. I think we're living a story of pioneers, but there's a quick prologue. The story actually starts with my mom. She has sworn me to secrecy about her age, but let me just say that she is alive. She has seen most of the 20th century. When she was 72, she moved from Florida out to California, where I was living. Her friends said to her, "You'll never be able to start a new life out there." And she said, "Watch me." And for more than 2 decades now, she has built her new life, and she's still going strong like the Energizer Bunny. She says to me fairly often, "Who ever thought I would live this long?" And it's not just my mom, it's her friends, and it's a lot of people. You may know this already, but here are the stats. As the baby boomers get older, 10,000 people are turning 65 every single day until 2029. And even without reading the fine print on the chart, you can see where the trend line is going. It starts in 2000, when there were 35 million people over 65. 2010 was the inflection point, just as the leading edge of the baby boomers began to turn 65. Today, there are 52 million of us over 65. And in 2050, that number will grow by about 60% to 83 million. So there are more of us, and we're living longer than at any other period in American history. Women reaching 65 can be expected to live on average for about 21 more years, until age 86. And more people are living to be 100 years old. You probably have some friends who are 100, 101. Between the year 2000 and 2014, the number of Americans over the age of 100 increased 43%. I've come to call these the unexpected decades. Whoever thought we might live this long? We are pioneers in brand new territory. You know, it used to be that when you turned 65 and retired, the company gave you a gold watch and you politely dropped dead. But not now. So the question is, how are we going to navigate the years ahead? Where's the compass? Where's the guidebook? And I was trying to answer some of these questions for me, maybe for others. And after doing research and interviews and workshops, most recently at my Wellesley reunion last June, I was struggling with how to pull all this material together, and then it hit me. Do it as a Harvard Business School style case, essentially a story about someone facing retirement, along with some practical tools. So the case of the Kickass Retirement was born, and today I'd like to share with you those tools as well as some brand new material. So with your participation, here's what I hope we can do in the next few minutes. We are not going to talk about financial issues or health issues or where you're going to live, which are all exceedingly important topics. But there's a fair amount of advice out there about this. You probably get emails about this all the time. What I hope we can do today is plant some seeds, work through a few tools that you may find useful. And in short, we're going to focus on what you want to do with the rest of your life. We're not talking about a radical makeover, and we're not assuming that anything you're doing needs changing at all. But perhaps you might like to do a little gentle fine tuning. And especially because I know we have a lot of people who are thinking about retirement. This may give you a chance to look ahead and see what you're going to be doing then. One of my current favorite writers is a guy named Dan Harris. He has a series of books called 10% Happier How-To Books. I'll give you the details and the resources at the end of the webinar about one of them that I particularly like. But I love that notion, 10% happier. That's where we're heading. So I hope this session may offer you some ideas and some insights, give us a chance to explore together, and maybe reaffirm your direction. Every one of us creates her own later life. Each person's solutions are unique. Who better to pioneer into these unexpected decades than Wellesley women? So let's find out a little bit about you. Thanks to all of you who answered our question. This is a snapshot of who we have here today. We have a great range of people. Roughly 60% of you on the right-hand side of this circle are thinking about retirement or very close to retiring. And the other 40% on the left-hand side, there's a nice spread between the newly retired folks, the early times folks, and the pros who've been retired for more than 5 years. So we'll try to address both sides of retirement. So let me start here with just a couple of thoughts. If you haven't yet retired, I know it can be a totally scary prospect. Maybe some of you can't wait to have all that freedom, but I know that some women have said they are still working because they are literally afraid to retire. You'll see that in our question, I've used the idea of a cliff, flying off the cliff, and it can seem as though you're throwing yourself off a cliff into the unknown. So some of the tools we'll talk about today, I hope, may help you start to map what retirement might look like, and I'll try to weave in some specific things that you can do as you approach retirement. And if you're in that wonderful group of people who are newly retired, there's sometimes that honeymoon period. You get to sleep in, enjoy the freedom. And then, at least it was this way for me, one day I realized that I had lost my sense of direction. You know, when you're working, there's structure. When you're not working, it can feel more like chaos. And sometimes you have this nagging feeling that you're keeping busy, but maybe you aren't doing what's really important to you. So no matter where you are on this timeline, we'll try to offer some ways for you to create a later life that you're going to love. As we begin our dive into this world of retirement, though, I've got a quick confession to make. I hate the word retirement, and maybe some of you do too. You language folks may know that the very word retirement comes from the French and literally means to draw back, to withdraw, to retreat. And too often it seems that our society sees older people as having retreated, withdrawn to the sidelines. Sure, you get your Medicare card and you get a discount at the movies. But as one researcher put it, in America, retirement is often seen as the end of one's productive, useful life. Yikes. So to frame the rest of our journey today, let me suggest that there's another way to look at retirement, and actually it comes from Wellesley. Here's something that I know you're familiar with, the Wellesley College seal. And we all know about non ministrari sed ministrare. And many of you are probably living proof of that precept. But there's something else on the seal that maybe you haven't noticed much. I know I hadn't. In the middle is a quote from Dante, incipit vita nova. You Latin scholars know what this means. There are various translations, but I think the one I like the best is simply, here begins a new life. I always thought it meant that we freshmen were beginning a new life. I suppose it does. But I think these are words that we can hold on to now. Retirement isn't necessarily withdrawal. Here begins a new life is telling us that retirement is yet another one of life's transitions. Transitions call on us to create new values and new meanings for our lives. I'm trying to practice saying, I didn't retire, I refocused. Retirement can indeed be a time to refocus, a chance to reignite our energies, a regeneration, a rebirth. I want to share with you some quotes from a survey of Wellesley women in their mid-70s. And I'd like you to listen for the word new. When asked what they were looking forward to, many of them said they were seeking new beginnings, new interests. They were excited about moving to a new home, looking forward to my next intellectual achievement, exploring new places, learning new things, making new friends, experiencing new activities, and embarking on new adventures. So the first thing I'd like to offer you today is a Wellesley motto for the years ahead. Here begins a new life. And what do you want from this new life? How can you figure out your own sense of direction? Here is, and I think some of you who signed in early may have seen this up on the screen. Here is a word cloud of what you told us. You know how this works. The more times a word is mentioned, the larger it gets. But this is an incredible picture of what you all are looking for. Later, when they post the slide deck, you might like to print this out and study it and read the fine print. It is truly amazing. There's so many themes here. Clearly, the big one, is fulfillment. And I think there's a cluster of words that go with that: contentment and purpose and satisfaction. That seems to be a major theme. There's also fun and enjoyment. And I love this one: permission to relax. There's community activism, helping those less fortunate. And there are relationship themes. I love this one: more time with nieces. It's a fabulous list. And since we're talking today, among other things, about happiness and well-being, let me just mention that you have pretty much captured what psychologists tell us are the 5 pillars of well-being. There's positive emotions, engagement, meaning, achievements, and relationships. And you're touching on all of those. Let's broaden this out just a bit and let me briefly show you some of the large themes that I've come across. You'll see that they are very similar to what you've all expressed. A lot of people are looking for engagement and relevance. They want to have a positive attitude and be resilient in the face of the changes they know are coming. For some people, a key goal is to give back to their community and to others. And another desire, and these are by no means mutually exclusive, is to explore and be curious, to learn new stuff and try new things. Here's another one, and it's from a Wellesley woman, and I love the way she put it. She is searching for a purposeful passion. Or maybe you don't want to save the world, you just want to kick back and enjoy some well-earned time off. Or maybe your goal is something else. Whatever your goal or goals, figuring out what you want is more than half the battle. It's about what some people call setting intention. Define what you want, and amazing things start to happen. Put another way, it's hard to find something that you're not looking for. Many people, from psychologists to philosophers to spiritual leaders, have said that what we think about, what we focus on, becomes our reality. When you set out to find something, it suddenly changes how you think and act. You become open to possibilities. You start to see opportunities, and you find people who can help you on your way. So on this journey, set your course. What are you aiming for? Okay, so if we all may have different goals or even multiple goals, then how do we put this put together this new life? So let's take a look now at what people tend to do in their later years. To begin with, a lot of people keep on working either full-time or part-time. Government statistics will tell you that roughly 20% of people over 65 are working full-time or part-time. My current favorite kind of statistics are Wellesley statistics. And here's some data from my own class, the class of 63. I will do the math for you. We are roughly between 75 and 77 years old. Wellesley women, and maybe this is no surprise, are beating the national average. Some 27%, at least in this age group, are still working in their field, full-time or part-time. And of course, younger alumni are working in higher numbers. About 33% of alumni in their mid to late 60s are working full or part-time. A Wellesley doctor in her 70s works part-time and says that the highlight of each week is the time she spends mentoring interns. A judge does legal consulting part-time. Several alumni are professors teaching full-time or part-time. A painter is now teaching art history, and listen to this. She marvels that, in her own words, I had to wait until my 70s to discover my real talent. There's another approach, and it's not so much about work. It seems to be more about finally pursuing lifelong passions. I've called it sort of all in on a new life. Sometimes it's 180 degrees from what people have done before. Some people leave the city to raise horses in Montana or start a self-sustaining farm in Vermont. A woman entrepreneur sold her company, retired to Texas to pursue her lifelong love of dogs. She's now a professional dog trainer. Some people use their later years to spend virtually all of their time on their favorite pursuits. A Wellesley woman is devoting her time to writing a book of haiku poetry. Another is spending virtually full time doing genealogy research. And another, you gotta listen to this one, is continuing her multi-year adventure as an eclipse chaser. She claims to be addicted to viewing eclipses and saw her most recent one last year with her teenage grandchildren. Most people, though, put together a wide range of activities, a huge mix. They take yoga, become granny nannies for the grandchildren, take classes online or at local colleges and universities. They travel. They found nonprofit organizations or they run them. They volunteer in religious organizations, social service or political groups. They participate in book clubs. The freedom and the choices are virtually endless. And some people in this group have come up with some fascinating approaches, which I'd like to share with you. One is thirds. One woman told me that she organizes her life by thinking of her activities roughly in thirds. 1/3 is family time. She babysits for her grandchildren. 1/3 is learning. She is studying photography. And 1/3 is giving back. A lawyer by training, she volunteers in a poverty project. I think this is my favorite. Another woman shapes her life by creating projects. I call it projectifying, and here's how it goes. She happens to live in New York City. She loves string quartets. She is a fabulous cook. She actually has cooked Babette's Feast. And if you don't know what that is, do find the movie. It's wonderful. She goes frequently to several art museums, and she has created a project. Her project is to see all 34 Vermeer paintings. You art majors probably know that there are 34 paintings currently officially attributed to the Dutch painter Vermeer, and they are located all over the world. So this project has taken her to Amsterdam, Berlin, London, and Vienna. She isn't finished. There are more Vermeers to see and more cities. It's a grand project to give purpose and structure to her life, let alone another good reason to go to Europe. You can projectify at home too. One woman's project is to create Netflix film festivals, ordering up all the films of the Spanish filmmaker Pedro Almodovar. Or as they did in the movie about Julia Child, you can projectify by cooking your way through your favorite cookbook. So in our search for the guidebook for a later life, we've talked about pioneering our way into this new life, setting intention, figuring out what we're looking for. And we've taken a big picture look at some of the different pathways that people take. Let's drill down now and look at what you are doing every day. So step one is taking the inventory. And if you had a chance to do the worksheets ahead of time, this is a good time to get those out. But if you haven't done the worksheets, not to worry, we'll talk through them. The funny thing I've found about these later years is that sometimes we feel very clear about where we're heading, and sometimes we feel that we've lost the roadmap. And that's how the inventory was born. It's the first step in making your personal map. So if you think about all that you're doing, your activities probably fall into one of three buckets. There are the personal things, looking after yourself personally. Things like fitness, dieting, medical care, taking care of your home. Are you downsizing? Are you moving to a new one? Pursuing hobbies like serious cooking, playing the piano, finishing that needlepoint cushion. And then there's family and friends, and this one can be huge, especially in your later years. Caregiving for your loved ones, your spouse, mother or father, children, grandchildren, your favorite aunt or other relatives and friends, or simply visiting with your family, spending time with your friends. And then there's the broader community, the outside world. Things like taking Spanish classes, volunteering with social service groups, political groups, your professional work, part-time consulting basis, what have you, membership in groups, book clubs, religious groups, travel, and so on. And as you've probably noticed, there's a rough progression here from core me stuff outward to family and friends and to the outside world. And depending on your own life circumstances, you may be doing more in one of these areas than in the others. So let's take a look at your personal inventory. So here's the first worksheet that we set out in advance. And we're going to take a very few brief pauses along the way so you can jot down some thoughts. But perhaps if this resonates with you, you can take 5 or 10 minutes after we're done to fill out your worksheets more completely, or you can simply let the ideas percolate. The goal here is not necessarily to finish the worksheets, but to introduce you to the tools, and as we said at the outset, to plant some seeds. And especially for those of you who are thinking about retirement, you will probably find that the last bucket, the one that has the paid work in it, that may be the big one for you now. So if you like, I'd invite you to use this sheet as a map for the future. What do you see yourself doing later on? You may still be doing some paid work, but how else will you fill your time? I want to suggest something too at this point, because I do know we have so many people who are looking ahead to retirement. So you can start to review your worksheet, but let me just mention a couple of other ideas for those of you who are looking ahead. And one is, and you can use this worksheet to do it, but also start yourself a folder, an electronic folder or a physical folder, and start putting in it all the things, the scraps of paper, the catalogs that come from the local community college, something about a volunteer activity. You don't have time for it now, but maybe later. And start to just throw in there scraps of ideas. This might be interesting. So one is sort of to start your future folder. And the second idea I'd like to suggest to you, and again, it can fit in with this map as well, is the idea of overlap. while you're still working, maybe you can squeeze out a little time to volunteer in some project that you think may be interesting and maybe could grow into something more important for you, more meaningful for you after you cut back or completely quit the full-time job. So the idea of overlap can really be helpful because it gives you something. You're not just leaving from something, you are going to something. Okay, so here goes. We're going to let you review your worksheet and fill it in, and we're going to pause, and if this works, we'll just give you a few seconds of perhaps some nice thinking music. So here we go. Okay, I'm sure some of you would like a little more time, but I want to ask you this question. Now that you've roughed in or begun your inventory, the next step asks you, do you like what you see? Are you spending the time the way you want to? Where have things gotten out of whack, unbalanced? Do you want to reallocate your time if you can? Where would you like to make some adjustments? And while you're thinking about that, let me give you a couple of examples. If some of you raised children, you may remember a picture that maybe looked like this, when the main bucket was the family one in the middle, and especially when the kids were babies, there was virtually no you time at all, not even time to take a bath. Today, if you're doing a lot of caregiving for a spouse, a parent, a child, a relative, you know how this bucket can pretty much take over your life. So that may be the shape of your life right now. Or perhaps it's the broader community bucket that has gotten out of whack. I have a friend who is active on a lot of boards, and she talks about what she calls board creep. You start doing one thing, then you take on another, and then you get asked to join another group. And pretty soon, there's too much in this bucket. As another friend puts it, time to de-board. This bucket is also where the paid work lives. If the part-time job has expanded too much, or if you're still working full-time and loving it less, then maybe it's time to recalibrate. Whether it's the classes you're taking, the volunteer work you're doing, the paid job you have, or the book club, any of these can sometimes outlive their usefulness. If things have changed at work and it's no longer satisfying, if the board you're on has gotten stale, if you really find that the book club meetings have become a chore, then maybe you want to readjust. So to recap, when you look at today's buckets, do you like what you see? Where can you let go of certain activities in order to spend more time on things you may have neglected? But wait, as they say in the Ginsu knife commercials, there's more. There's one more way to look at your inventory and re-engineer it. You may be familiar with the concept of flow. It's been around for a while, and it's getting a lot of attention these days. So that we're all on the same page, just what is flow? Here comes the tongue twister. The Hungarian-American psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, by many accounts, is the father of flow, and this is what he says. He says, the ego falls away. Time flies. Every action, movement, and thought follows inevitably from the previous one, like playing jazz. Your whole being is involved, and you're using your skills to the utmost. In short, flow is a mental state where you are fully immersed in the present moment, totally focused, and this is the key, unaware of the passage of time. And here's the payoff. Psychologists tell us that the more moments of flow we experience, the happier we are. We talked at the beginning about being maybe 10% happier. Well, this is one of the most powerful tools to get you there. So I invite you to think about when it is that you experience flow. What are you doing when you are unaware of the passage of time? When you are fully immersed in the present moment and totally focused? At my Wellesley reunion, an artist said she experiences flow when she's painting. Several people said they experience flow when they take long walks, or garden, or read. So what is flow for you? To spark your own thinking, here's what people have told me are their flow activities. And the list is virtually endless. I'll let you scan it for a moment. Flow is amazing. And if you take only one thing from the webinar, I hope you'll think more about discovering the activities that put you in flow and finding more ways to build more flow into your life. And especially if you're looking ahead to retirement, what are the things you do in small moments now? Maybe you don't have a lot of time to garden, but if that's your thing, then make time and think about filling your next year's with more of that. Whatever is your set of flow activities, think about filling in, coloring in the picture of your next few years with those kinds of activities. So to give you a start on doing that, I'm going to ask you to look back at your worksheet, your inventory, and where can you spend more time on the flow activities? Where are they? Circle the activities that are real flow activities, and what non-flow activities can you minimize or let go of? What changes do you want to make? So again, we'll pause for a couple of seconds so you can think about your favorite flow activities. Here we go. Before we leave this page, let me share with you what one Wellesley woman said about her later years. She is looking forward to the change of seasons, listening to a symphony orchestra, hiking in forests, swimming in a cool lake in summer, reading books, loving our grandchildren, learning bird calls. Do you think she gets it about flow? There's one last step and one more tool for you, and it's the champagne bucket. What are the sparkling, extra special things you've always wanted to do? What could make your life especially meaningful? This is where you can put your dreams, the ideas that have been nagging at you, things that you say, someday I'm going to do. So we'll do one last brief pause here so you can review what you've written or jot down some more thoughts. So here we go, last pause. As you look at or think about your champagne bucket, let me share with you something that might free up your thinking, especially for those of you who are thinking ahead to retirement. These may be some of the key things that you can be aiming for. So there's a phrase attributed to several people, including Eleanor Roosevelt, and it's this: what would you do if you knew you could not fail? What might you do if you thought about all of your passions and interests and abilities? What ideas or projects have you been incubating? Where are they nagging in the back of your head? What if there's someone looking down from on high saying, you still have more time on earth. Show me what you can do. This may be the time to sing your song. And what if you could not fail? So here's an invitation to do a little homework. Since this may take some thought, after this webinar, or in the shower, or just before you go to sleep at night, think about your champagne bucket. What can you add to your list? Are there old dreams that you can let go of? What if you never become fluent in French, ever? What can you modify, reinterpret, reframe? You know, it may be too late to become an architect, but you could take an online course in the history of architecture. You could make a project of visiting all the museums designed by Frank Gehry. Who can help you? Share your idea, your project, and you will find people who can help you. Someone was asking for this webinar, how can I find people who can help me scope out an encore career, you know, a second career or a modification of what I've already been doing? Ask people. I'm going to suggest that you Google encore careers. There will be lots of sources and resources, but talk to people and say, who do you know who's doing this? And you will find people who can help you. And maybe the most powerful question of all is, what first step can you take? Don't worry about the end point. Dive in now. Listen to the voice in your head that is telling you, don't think about it anymore, start doing it. What if you try to write chapter 1 of your novel? And ask yourself, if not now, when? So let's take a look at where we've been. We began by redefining, reimagining retirement as a rebirth, a chance to refocus, to begin a new life. We talked about setting intentions. What do you want from retirement? Then we looked at the big picture, that pie chart, what people actually do, the different ways that people craft their later lives. And then we began to build your map. Step 1, taking inventory. What are you currently doing? Then we asked, what adjustments do you want to make? Where are the flow activities? Where can you have more flow and amp up your life? And lastly, we added in the champagne, the sparkle, the things that may give your life that purposeful passion. And as we're trying to do to straddle both sides of retirement, these can be tools you can use if you're already retired, but also they can be a map for your life ahead. So in sum, I hope that our explorations today may help you on your journey. And that now, and as your life continues to evolve, you'll have some tools you can use to check in from time to time. Think about what you really love, what you really want to do, and realign and refocus. I hope that we've given you some ideas so that you may be moving from this to this, so that you can craft the rest of your life with engagement and purpose and joy. Thank you very much. And what I'm going to do is hand it back to Sarah for any questions that you may have in the few minutes remaining. And in the meantime, I mentioned, here's a short list of some resources that you might enjoy checking out. These are some of my favorites, and I hope they may be useful to you if you want to pursue some of this further. So Sarah, back to you.
Thank you so much, Connie, and thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. We'll go ahead and get started with a couple questions. So again, as I mentioned, please feel free to chat me at Kenny Freundlich if you have any questions. To get us started, I have a question for you, Connie. Some participants have asked about loneliness as a key issue in later years. Could you speak a bit about that?
Absolutely. Yes. Loneliness cures. It's tough because often we find ourselves without the partner that we've had for years. And the older we get, we lose our friends and so forth. And loneliness can be a real issue. And we also know, you know this too, that social activity and relationships are really critical to both mental and physical well-being as we get older. So some loneliness cures that people have told me about, and some of these I think are really amazing. Get a pet. Now that one you probably thought about. Walk your pet. Pets are people magnets. You know this. Walk that pet and talk to the people. It's so easy. What a cute doggy you have. But here's the idea that never would have occurred to me, and someone mentioned it. Walk someone else's pet. There are people, right, working people, what have you, who don't have time to walk their pets. You don't have to have the pet. You can walk someone else's pet, and it gives you a chance not only to get out and take a wonderful walk, but to meet some people and to talk with people. Join an organization. Work on a committee. Volunteer to work with other folks on a committee, and you'll find some of them you're going to like. Some of them may become your friends. Donate. One thing you can do, for those of you for whom this makes some sense financially as well, if you give to certain organizations at certain levels, they say, well, you're in this group and we have activities for this group of our supporters. A great way to meet people who share your interest in whatever you've donated to. Use the internet. Find affinity groups. Comment on articles in newspapers. Play Scrabble or Bridge or what have you online. I mean, the internet is such a marvelous way to be connecting with people all over the world. Don't forget to check out senior center activities or volunteer there. There's all kinds of stuff. I mean, it may or may not be exactly your cup of tea, but let me just tell you, I saw the local community center was offering like a one-day course in hand reflexology. Okay, some of you know what that is. It's kind of a form of hand massage. I said, okay, I think I'll learn that. Well, it was marvelous. Met some interesting people and came away with an interesting technique. Subscribe to a music or theater series and go and start a conversation with the person you sit next to. Check out the programs at your local library. I mean, local libraries these days, as many of you may know, are repurposing themselves because we do so much reading electronically. But now at the library, there are all sorts of language groups, meetup groups, yoga classes. They're repurposing their wonderful facilities. So I hope in that laundry list, you may have found some things, basically easy ways of getting out of your own bubble, if you will, and out there and meeting with people and finding people who may share your interests. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Connie. One more question, and then I also just got a question that deals as specifically in terms of resources and support available through Wellesley. So after Connie takes this last question, then I will address that as well. So Connie, for you, for folks that are kind of preparing and ready, so I guess it's kind of a two-part question. One would be, what are some good strategies as they get ready to take the plunge? And then once they start that, what are some good ways to handle this very major transition?
Oh, great. Marvelous. That's pretty broad. We could do another webinar on that one. Okay, so sort of preparing and then getting started. I think I mentioned a couple things, and let me pick up on them. As you're preparing, to leave that job? First of all, do you have to leave it entirely? If you like it, is there a way that you can cut back on your time, work part-time, or consult back to whoever it is that you've been working? So in other words, it doesn't have to be completely cold turkey. But I do think it's scary. It can be very, very scary. You say, I'm going to give you an example. There's a fellow I talked to, and he said, I had my last day at work yesterday, and there was champagne and there were balloons, and everybody thanked me for everything I'd done. I went home, I went to sleep. I woke up the next morning to silence. That, I think, is the scary thing. So what are you going to do? And this is where some of the maps we talked about may be helpful. Actually start and chart out, okay, what would a typical day look like? It's going to change, it's going to evolve, but what about, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to give that fitness membership that I haven't paid any attention to. I'm going to start going, or I'm going to find a new gym, or I'm going to take yoga, what have you. Start to map out the things that you might like to do. And so two points about that, and then one other thought. So the 2 points about that are, do start, as I mentioned, sort of put a folder together, electronic or otherwise, of the things that you might want to think about, political volunteer, take a course in whatever, do this trip that you never had enough vacation time to travel. Just dump the stuff somewhere and then begin to review it. So at least you have a sort of smorgasbord to pick from. And then the other thing, I mentioned it earlier, but let me mention it again. I think having an overlap activity can really help. Specifically for me, I was doing a full-time consulting job, but I managed to squeeze out enough time to go over to Cambodia and do my volunteer work. And it became a passion, and I began to love it. And I kind of knew at the time, I'm doing what I think I want to do when I quit the full-time job. So use whatever little bits of time you have to explore, try something that you could maybe be doing while you're working. And if you like it, it could then expand for later on. So those are those two issues. And the last point I'd make, you mentioned, so what you do is sort of that early time. I think I really have 3 things about that. Some of you may know this woman named Marie Kondo, Kondo. She has written books about uncluttering your house. What it is, though, for those of you who may have seen, you can see her videos for free online. Take a look. She really has a philosophy. It's a philosophy, not only about, getting rid of the stuff you don't need, but it's about uncluttering, getting rid of the things that no longer bring you joy. And really what it is, if you do it, or you do part of it, what you're going to do, it's a great thing to do right after you retire, because you're clearing your mental house as well. I really think you'll find it marvelous, because you'll get rid of the stuff you don't want. You'll surround yourself with things that bring you joy, and you'll find it sort of clears the deck. So that's one thing. Another thing is coast, relax, sleep in. Don't feel that you have to launch right into saving the world. Passions, I think passions are sometimes a little bit overrated. They say you don't find your passion finds you. So just coast, relax, enjoy it. And then the third one is be curious. Experiment, try things. Maybe you're going to like doing pottery. Maybe that's not your thing. Maybe you want to do something else. If you experiment and put yourself out there, you may find that there will be passions that will evolve from that. So in those early days, clean house, coast, and be curious. Sarah, back to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who is commenting on the Zoom group chat. There's some great discussion that's already happening. There was one specific question about how us here in Career Education can help. And I wanted to mention that we do have 2 alumni career advisors that you are able to make an appointment with using our Handshake platform. So that's an opportunity to speak to a career coach to talk through what you may be thinking. We also have the Wellesley Hive platform, which is another opportunity to create with other Wellesley alums past the clubs. So it's a platform that's designed specifically for Wellesley, and you can create a profile there, and it's really meant it's very connections based. So there is kind of a mentor-mentee designation there, but it can be peer-to-peer, someone who may have already retired, maybe hasn't, is just looking to connect back. So just wanted to mention those 2 platforms as well and options to support you. And if you have any questions, you can always email me. My email address is sahmed7@wellesley.edu. But we will, as I mentioned, be sharing this recording and posting it on the Career Education website without needing a password or anything for access. So Connie, just want to thank you so much for your not only gracious offer to have this conversation with us, but for sharing your expertise and all of your knowledge on this subject. So we're so grateful.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you to all of you. And I hope we've just really started a dialogue. Thanks to everybody.